Three Sacred Treasures Civilization Theory, The Limits of Our Current Civilization. Episode 0, The Origin of Civilization. Part 1, The Widespread Sense of Stagnation. Why is it that the harder people try, the less they seem to be rewarded? Why is it that even people who believe they are right end up opposing one another? Why is it that, although life has become more convenient, it somehow feels harder to live? What if this is not a personal problem, but a structural problem of civilization itself? If that were the case, how would you begin to see this world differently? 3 what-ifs. Have you ever considered this possibility? What if civilization operates on just 3 fundamental mechanisms? What if human consciousness is not all the same, but unfolds across 7 distinct stages? What if time does not move only in a straight line from past to future, but progresses while also cycling back on itself? What if light and shadow were originally one, and later became separated? And what if, through the complex interaction of all these elements, the civilization we are now living in came into existence? If so, how would you begin to see this world differently? About this series. This video marks the beginning of a series called Three Sacred Treasures Civilization Theory. Episode 0 is positioned as the origin point of the series, a condensed foundation containing its entire structure. You are not expected to understand everything at once. By returning to these ideas again and again over time, the meaning is designed to gradually become clearer. Today I want to talk about the limits of civilization itself. This is not metaphor. This is not ideology. This is not religion. This is a discussion about the minimal structure that quietly governs how civilization functions. For example, no matter how advanced a smartphone may be, without an operating system, it is nothing more than a box. In the same way, our society also rests upon structures that quietly determine everything even though we rarely notice them. What is a minimal structure? A minimal structure refers to the foundational framework without which a system simply cannot function. More concretely, a house requires pillars, beams, and a foundation. Language requires grammar. A smartphone requires an operating system. Cooking requires ingredients and heat. No matter how complex something appears on the surface, there are always essential elements, without which it cannot exist. That is what I mean by a minimal structure. Why this conversation matters now. Why talk about this now? Because more and more people today are quietly feeling that something about this world doesn't feel right anymore. That discomfort may not be a personal issue. The sense of stagnation many of us feel. Where did it begin? And where is it leading us? I am not here to dictate an answer. Rather, I want to explore this question together with you. There is no visible, dramatic crisis in everyday life. And yet many people feel that they are no longer able to move forward. Effort does not lead to reward. People who believe they are right cannot understand each other. Convenience increases, yet meaning fades. This is not a problem of individuals. It is a sign that civilization itself is approaching the limits of its structure. Today, instead of offering answers, we will look together at where this discomfort begins and where it may be leading us. Signs appearing across civilization. Across nearly every domain, we see signs of stagnation. For example, people feel life has lost its meaning. Values have fragmented and no shared compass remains. Dialogue turns into conflict. There is no longer a shared foundation for understanding. Politics has lost its purpose. Public sentiment and national direction no longer align. States generate friction rather than stability. Preserving authority replaces preserving order. Religion hardens into doctrine. Ideals diverge from lived behavior. AI evokes anxiety. We can no longer see clearly where technology is heading. Psychology and philosophy fragment endlessly. Theories multiply, but coherence disappears. Economic growth feels hollow. Numbers rise, but lived well-being does not. These are not separate problems. They all stem from the same structural misalignment. The fatal flaw in modern civilization. Where does this problem originate? In simple terms, the natural cycle of progression has stopped functioning. When problems arise, their root causes are never resolved. New problems simply replace old ones. We'll manage for now, but nothing really changes. This pattern has continued for a long time. What is Kishotenketsu? In East Asian thought, there is a concept called Kishotenketsu, a way of understanding processes as flowing through 4 phases: beginning, development, transformation, resolution. It reflects a cyclical view of nature itself. Life is born, grows, transforms, ends, and from that ending, something new begins. The clearest example is the seasons: spring, beginning; summer, growth; autumn, transformation; winter, closure and preparation. Although often used as a narrative structure, this pattern reflects something deeper: the rhythm of nature, life, and civilization itself. In this series, I will use this not merely as storytelling technique, but as a universal structural model for life, society, history, consciousness, and civilization, the meaning of each phase. Beginning. The moment something starts, conditions emerge, context becomes visible. We understand what is happening. Development. Expansion of movement. Complexity increases. Elements multiply. Understanding deepens. Transformation. A turning point. Unexpected events. Perspective shifts. Direction changes. Resolution. Meaning settles. Direction becomes clear. A cycle completes. Space for the next beginning appears. Resolution is both an ending and preparation for a new beginning. Why this cycle matters. When this natural structure functions properly, stories make sense. Actions feel meaningful. Closure allows progress. What happens when resolution disappears? When the final phase disappears, stories never conclude, problems accumulate. A sense of suffocation emerges. And today, this cycle has stopped functioning at the level of civilization itself. An analogy, a relationship. Modern civilization resembles a couple, while refusing to face its underlying issues. A problem occurs, they pretend it is resolved. Another problem arises, distrust accumulates. This is a cycle of development and crisis without resolution, the future of civilization. When we extend this pattern to civilization as a whole, we see two possible outcomes. One, civilization continues outwardly, but becomes hollow inside. Two, a triggering event leads to rapid collapse. Our current world appears already close to the first, and the risk of tipping into the second is always present. Historical moments on the edge of collapse. Humanity has approached collapse many times, yet survived often by sheer contingency. Examples include the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Berlin Crisis, the years preceding World War I, and the period before the Lehman Shock. These were not merely events. They exposed structural fatigue within civilization itself, a shared pattern across crises. Across all such cases, we see the same pattern. Everyone recognizes the problem. No one addresses its root cause. Temporary fixes accumulate. We survived, this time repeats. Eventually, a small trigger causes collapse. The cause of collapse is never the event itself. The structure had already reached its limits. This mirrors exactly the dysfunctional relationship described earlier, expanded to the scale of civilization. Collapse has not been avoided. It has only been postponed. Institutions still function. Technology still advances. But meaning, ethics, and direction are fading. I interpret these as not isolated incidents, but symptoms of structural limits becoming visible. Civilization as an operating system. What if this constant tension and stagnation does not originate in individuals, but in the structure of civilization itself? If so, civilization begins to resemble a system, operating according to hidden rules. In other words, civilization functions like an operating system. An OS is the invisible framework that determines behavior without our conscious awareness. The invisible rules we live by. We live daily within national systems, workplace rules, social norms, unspoken expectations. We rarely question them, yet they silently shape every decision we make. Just as a smartphone's OS governs all applications, civilization too has an unseen OS that governs human behavior. Seen this way, our perception of civilization fundamentally changes, defining the royal lineage OS. So how should we describe the operating system of our current civilization? I refer to it as the royal lineage OS. For civilization to remain stable over time, there must be a shared structure of legitimacy, a reason people accept and follow authority. This legitimacy structure is what I call the royal lineage OS. This is not religion. This is not ideology. It is a structural system that allows civilizations to maintain coherence across time. A contemporary example. The British monarchy holds almost no political power today, and yet it still functions as a symbol of national unity, identity, tradition, continuity. These are upheld through the function of legitimacy. Ancient Rome as an example. In ancient Rome, the emperor was treated as divine. This was not merely belief, it was a shared legitimacy structure. That explained why authority was obeyed. As long as that structure remained stable, Rome flourished. When that structure destabilized, the empire began to fracture from within. A universal pattern across civilizations. Across cultures, forms differ, but the underlying structure, the mechanism that sustains legitimacy, is remarkably consistent. Japan's case. In Japan, this structure was preserved with exceptional continuity through the symbolism of the three sacred treasures. This is not a religious argument. It can be understood as an unusually refined preservation of civilizational structure. Conclusion. What this series examines is not surface-level civilization, but the underlying structure that quietly shapes its operation. In Japan, civilizational continuity was sustained through symbolic structure centered on the three sacred treasures. This structure is what I call the Royal Lineage OS, an operating system of civilization maintained through symbolic legitimacy. Why I use this term and what structural meaning lies behind it will be explored in detail in Episode 0, Part 2.